Hey kiddos, good morning. We left off in Enchanted when they're on their way to the boarding school, and Hattie and Olive, or at least Hattie, has kind of realized that something's up with Ella and that she has to do whatever they want. So she took the necklace, and now the both of them are sleeping, and she's looking through the gift that Mandy gave her. So, and my allergies are still a little bad, so hopefully I won't start sneezing and I'll have to stop, but hopefully I'll be good. What would the book show me next? A real fairy tale this time? The shoemaker and the elves. In this version, though, each elf had a personality, and I came to know them better than the shoemaker. And I finally understood why elves disappeared after the shoemaker made clothes for them. They went away to help a giant rid herself of a swarm of mosquitoes, too small for her to see. Although the elves left a thank you note for the shoemaker, he put his coffee down on it and stuck to the cup's damp bottom. The story made sense now. Your book must be fascinating. Let me see, said Hattie. Oh no. I jumped. If she took this from me, I'd kill her. The book got heavier, and I handed it over. Her eyes widened as she read. You enjoy this? The life cycle of the centaur tick? She turned pages. Gnomish silver mining in hazardous terrain? Guys, the book's magic because they can't see what she sees. Oh, thank goodness. Isn't it interesting, I said, my panic subsiding now. You can read for a while. If we're going to be friends, we should have the same interests. You can share my interests, dear, she returned to the book. Our journey taught me what to expect from Hattie. At the inn on our first night, she informed me that I had taken the square in her carriage that would otherwise have been occupied by their maid. But we shan't suffer, because you can take her place. She cocked her head to one side. No, you are almost noble. It would be an insult to make a servant of you. You'll be my lady-in-waiting, and I shall share you with my sister sometimes. Ollie, is there something Ella can help you with? No, I can dress and undress myself, Olive said. No one said you can't, Hattie said, and sat on the bed we were all to share. She lifted her feet. Kneel down and take off my slippers for me, Ella. My toe aches. Without comment, I removed them. My nose filled with the right smell of her feet. I carried the slippers to the window and tossed them out. Hattie yawned. You've only made extra work for yourself. Go down now and fetch them. Olive rushed to the window. Your slippers fell into a bucket of slops. I had to carry the stinking slippers back to our room, but Hattie had to wear them until she was able to get fresh ones from her trunk. After that, she thought more carefully about her commands. At breakfast the next morning, she pronounced the porridge horrible. Don't eat it, Ella. It will make you sick. She loaded her spoon with oatmeal. Steam rose from the bowl before me, and I caught a scent of cinnamon. Mandy always put cinnamon in her porridge, too. Why are you eating if it's bad, then? Olive asked her sister. I'm hungry. Yours looks all right. I'm eating mine even though it's vile. Her tongue clicked a speck of cereal off of the corner of her mouth. Because I need nourishment to take charge on our journey. You're not in charge, Olive began. You don't fancy your porridge, miss. The innkeeper sounded worried. My sister's stomach is queasy, Hattie said. You may take her bowl away. I am not her sister, I said as the innkeeper disappeared into the kitchen. Hattie laughed, scraping her spoon around the empty bowl for her last remains of porridge. The innkeeper was back with a plate of thick brown bread, studded with nuts and raisins. Perhaps this will tempt a lass's stomach. This will be much better for you, he said. I managed to take a big bite before a lady at the next table called out. Put it down, Ella. Hattie broke off a corner of the bread and tasted it. It's much too rich. Rich food is good for me, Olive said, reaching across the table. Between them, my breakfast disappeared in 4 bites. The swallow of bread was the last food I had on our 3-day trip, except for tonic. Hattie would have deprived me of it too, except she sampled it first, and then I relished her nauseated expression when she swallowed. So meaning that she thought it was so nasty she let her do it. Man, you guys, this is not good that they figured this out of her. Chapter 9. We passed through rich farmland on the final day of our journey to Jen, the town where our finishing school was located. The day was hazy and warm, and I was almost too hot to be hungry. Hattie had energy only for one command, for me to fan her. Fan me too, Olive said. She had worked out that if Hattie had told me to do something, I would do it. And if she directed me to do the same thing, I would do that too. Hattie hadn't explained my obedience to her. She didn't bother to explain much to the slow-thinking Olive, and she must have enjoyed keeping the delicious secret to herself. My arms ached. My stomach rumbled. I stared out of the window at a flock of sheep and wished for a diversion that would take my mind away from the lamb and lentil salad. My wish was granted instantly as the coach took off in a mad gallop. "Ogres!" the coachman yelled. A cloud of dust hid the road behind us. Though it made through it, I made out a band of ogres kicking up the dust as they chased us. But we were outdistancing them. The cloud was receding. "Why do you run from your friends?" one of them called. It was the sweetest voice I have ever heard. "We bear gifts of your heart's desires, riches, love, eternal life." Heart's desire. Mother. The ogres would bring her back from the death. Why were we tearing away from the ogres we most wanted? "Slow down," Hattie ordered, unnecessarily. The coachman had already reined the horses. So remember, you guys, that the ogres played tricks on people's minds so that they could get them to come and then eat them. So they're telling them lies and they're believing it. So it's not good. The ogres were only yards behind, untouched by their magic. The sheeps were baaing and beating their fear. Briefly, their noses covered. The hun-eyed words and spell broke. I remembered that ogres couldn't revive my mother. The horses again whipped to a gallop. But the ogres would be beyond the sheep in a minute, and we'd be at their mercy again. I shouted to Hattie and Olive and the coachman and footman, "Yell so you can't hear them." The coachman understood first and joined my voice with his, shouting words I'd never heard before. Then Hattie began. "Eat me last, she shrieked. But it was Olive who saved us. Her wordless roars drowned out thought. I don't know how she drew breath, but the sound was awful and unending. It continued as we passed the outlying homes of Jen, while the ogres faded from sight, and while I recovered from my fright. "Quiet, Ollie," Hattie said. "Nobody is going to be eaten. You're giving me a headache." But Olive didn't hush until the coachman stopped the carriage, came inside with us, and slapped her smartly across the face. Boom! "Sorry, miss," he said, and plopped out. Finishing school was in an ordinary wooden house, except for its enormous shrubs pruned into the shapes of wide-skirted maidens. So, the trees were shaped like women. Interesting. It might have been the home of any not so prosperous merchant. I hoped the lunch portions were generous, because I was simply starving. I had barely eaten anything in the last few days. The door opened as we drove up, and an erect, gray-haired lady strutted down the hallway to our carriage. Welcome, young ladies. She swept into the smoothest curtsy I'd ever seen. We curtsied in return. She waved a hand at me. But who is this? I spoke quickly before Hattie could explain me in any way that I didn't want to be explained. I'm Ella, madam. My father is Sir Peter of Frel. He wrote a letter. From my carpet bag, I extracted father's letter and the purse he'd given me. She tucked the letter and the purse, after weighing it expertly in her palm, into her apron pocket. What a lovely surprise! I'm Madam Edith, head mistress of your new home. Welcome to our humble establishment. She curtsied again. I wish she'd stop. My right knee cracked when I went down. We just had lunch. So much for generous portions. And we are sitting down to our embroidery. The young ladies are anxious to meet you, and it's never too soon to get started. She ushered us into the large, sunny room. Young ladies, she announced, here are 3 new friends for you. A room full of maidens rose, curtsied, and then resumed to their seats. Each one wore a pink gown with yellow hair ribbon. My gown was stained and wrinkled from the journey, and my hair was probably limp and unkempt. Back to work, ladies, Madam Edith said. Sewing mistress will help the new pupils. I lowered myself into a chair near the door and stared defiantly at the elegance around me. I met the eyes of a girl about my age. She smiled hesitantly. Maybe my look softened, because her smile grew and she winked at me. I hoped we'd be friends. Sewing mistress approached, bearing a needle and an assortment of colored threads. So the sewing mistress was probably their sewing teacher, is my guess. And a round of white linen marked with designs of flowers. I was to follow the outer line of the stitch of the flower and thread. The cloth would then cover a pillow or the back of a chair, made for design, made to be beautiful. After she explained what to do, sewing mistress left me, assuming I would know exactly what to do. But I had never held a needle before. Although I watched the other girls, I could not thread it. I struggled for a quarter of an hour, till sewing mistress rushed to my side. The child had been raised by ogres, or worse, she exclaimed, snatching it away from me. Hold it delicately. It is not a spear. One brings the thread into it. She threaded the needle with a green thread and returned it back to me. I held it delicately, too, as she ordered. She left my side, and I started stupidly at my task. Then I stuck the needle into the outline of a rose. My head ached from the lack of food. You have to knot it at the end of each thread and start again. The speaker was the lass who had winked at me before, maybe my potential friend. She had pulled her chair next to mine, and sewing mistress will ridicule you if you sew a green rose. Roses have to be pink or red, or yellow if you're daring. So I'm assuming that this woman is very strict. A pink gown similar to the ones that she wore was spread across her lap. She bent her head over to make a tiny stitch. Her dark hair was plaited, which is braided, into many braids that were gathered and woven into a high knot on her head. Her skin was the color of cinnamon, with a tint of raspberry in her cheeks. I couldn't help but thinking of food. I was just so hungry. Her lips curved up naturally, giving her a pleasant and contented air. Her name was Erida. Her name was Erida, and her family lived in Amanta, a city just over the border of Eritha. She spoke with an Eritrean accent, smacking her lips after the letter M, pronouncing her L's like Y's. You guys, I'm so bad at this. Abedesa itua en upanasa. I hoped this was Eri Nathan, for I am pleased to meet you. I had learned it from a parrot. She smiled at me. Ambisu akmano erotha? I only know a few words, I confess, smiling. She was miserably disappointed. It would have been so nice to have someone to talk in my language. You could teach me. Your accent is good, she said doubtfully. But writing mistress teaches Ariothan to everyone, and no one has picked it up at all. Maybe you will. I have a knack for languages, I said. She started to teach me right then. Once heard, always remembered is the way with languages and me. By the end of the hour, I was forming short sentences. Erida was delighted. Do you like finishing school? I asked in her language. She shrugged. You don't? Is it terrible? I asked, reverting to Kyrian, or English. A shadow fell across my neglected sewing. Sewing mistress picked up my pillow cover and announced dramatically, 3 stitches in all of this time? 3 vast, messy stitches, like 3 teeth in a toothless gum. Go to your room and stay there until it is time for bed. No supper for you tonight, she announced. My stomach growled so loudly that the whole room must have heard it. Hattie smirked at me. She couldn't have planned better herself. I wouldn't add to her pleasure. I'm not hungry, I announced. Then you may do without breakfast as well. Poor Ella. Wow, she's really not done well for herself. So we are knowing that she is really starving, and that's pretty much what's happening. And that's where we're going to end for today. And I am predicting that she's going to become friends with this girl. And I'm also noticing, and if you've ever seen the movie Ella Enchanted, that they did not really use much of the book because it is very different than the movie from what I remember. So we will continue next time. Have a great day. Mwah! Miss you guys.